content of everything.
As a result of what they did. So they have to be our country.
So
what take a place?
Before the British went in, what were they before?
What were they?
Tribes.
What's your point? What's your point? What's your
The
point?
reason South Africa is a
What's your point?
The reason South Africa is a country wasn't colonialism, going there and actually building a country.
So what makes you think that being a country, is the ultimate human achievement?
I'm not even saying it's a human achievement.
So I'm saying, but the point is that you can't call being a country a benefit to a people when, in order to become a country, yes, you have to go and genocide them, enslave them, massacre them, rob their land, dispossess them of their resources, and commit all kinds of atrocities against them for over hundreds of years. That doesn't make any sense. And then now you say, well, actually, at least you got a country out of it. No answer.
Not only did you get a country, you had an infrastructure and an economy that was working. They could have. Did they? Look what happened to Haiti. When Haiti was handed back, they managed to get themselves in a mad amount of debt when they couldn't recover back.
You mentioned tribes, What do you know about tribes? What do you know about tribes?
You know, I from London, not much.
Not much, exactly. So how do you know? So what do you know about how the social organisation of a tribe?
I don't know.
Exactly, you don't know.
No.
But if you don't know,
if you look at the Kenyan flag, they have.
But if you don't know, then don't talk about tribes. Because if you're going to tell me that Europeans brought infrastructure, but you don't know about the social organisation of so-called tribes, then you are not in a position to
how it was before.
Yeah.
And how was Africa
Of course not.
We're talking about this is the 18th and 19th century we're talking about, man. Even though Britain was the first to abolish slavery. Let's always remember that. Britain was the first country.
1807,
Spent our own empire.
1807.
Say again?
Thank you very much.
Sorry, what?
Thank you very much. It was Haiti. Thank you very much. Yes. The same Haiti that you were talking about fought a war in which they defeated the British, defeated the French, and defeated the Spanish in 1804 and became the first independent nation to completely abolish slavery.
You know what, I stand corrected. Haiti is the first country, even though it was a black country, and they killed all the white...
Thank you to my black sister for pointing that out.
Thank you to my sister. She's probably is correct in that sense.
She's not probably, she's definitely correct.
Okay.
Because you're talking about Britain in 1807, and bearing in mind that immediately after they saw... bearing in mind...
A majority black country killed the white people and made slavery abolished.
Think about what you're saying. 1807, Britain apparently abolished the slave trade. They didn't abolish slavery, they abolished the slave trade. Apparently, 3 years earlier, the British Parliament was campaigning against the revolution that was taking place in Haiti to the extent that they sent troops to fight. Exactly, but you can't celebrate Britain abolishing Britain. You cannot. Then don't celebrate Britain abolishing the slave trade. If Britain was fighting against the Africans in Haiti who were trying to free themselves, if Britain were fighting against the Africans in Haiti who were trying to free themselves, right? And then 3 years later, they decided we were going to abolish the slave trade. What was the intention for them doing that?
What's the innuendo you're...
I'm not giving the innuendo, I'm telling you straight. There is nothing to celebrate in Britain apparently abolishing the slave trade.
Even spending their own empire's money going up the west coast of Africa, stopping the actual slave
trade. If Britain abolished the slave trade, let me ask you this. If Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807, why were Africans being enslaved as a part of the British Empire right up until the 1830s? So slavery was still taking place as governed by Britain in Jamaica, in Trinidad, in so-called British Guyana, in the entire English-speaking Caribbean. But you're telling me that Britain was taking into the
because they were colonial superiors over the country. That was
what's your point? So,
is that how they were slaves?
You're not answering my question, right? So you're not answering my question, You're telling me that Britain abolished slave trade in 1807. But Britain was still enslaving people. Yes?
What do you mean by enslaving though? Are you talking
So
about
slavery,
you to do this
slavery,
or
no,
or do you mean run a country?
slavery as a part of the British Empire, slavery. So are you familiar with emancipation in the Caribbean in the 1830s? All right, okay. So I'm saying Britain said it abolished the slave trade in 1807. Then they said they abolished slavery in 1834. Yeah, so I'm saying between 1837 and 1834, Britain as a nation, yeah, as government policy, was still enslaving African people in the Caribbean. The same slavery that was taking place, the same slavery that was taking, the empire was already existed in 1807. Yeah, so these protections that you're talking about already existed in 1807. The same system of slavery, I'm asking the question, the same system of slavery that existed in the so-called English-speaking Caribbean pre-1807 existed post-1807 right up until the 1830s.
What kind of slavery was going on this way?
The same system of enslavement.
It was like, what was happening?
The exact same.
But what was it? I mean, I don't know.
Forced labor, separation of families, rape of women, children, and men for that matter. Yes. Okay. Torture via whipping, torture via branding, torture. That doesn't even allow to go into the creative ways that Britain tortured Africans. So, but that's
in an empire sense, how smart is it for an empire to say we are abolishing slavery? Which British did?
I didn't say the British are intelligent. I didn't say that's what they did.
Well, we managed to enslave the country, so I guess we can't be that stupid. But in terms of actually leaving the empire, and we would just jump out of the country, what would that do for the economy? For the British Empire economy? That's not. But it's not as though. But it's not as though what Britain was doing before was empowering the economy. The British Empire was a. So you're telling me, yeah, that Britain colonized nations for the benefit of those nations and not for the benefit of Britain? That's what I'm saying. For the economy, for our economy as a British.
Yeah, right. So therefore, exactly. So therefore,
well, it would have. Well, technically, location-wise, their economy, but it's our economy.
How? How? What? Alright, you tell me then. Yeah. What did Britain do as far as its colonial empires are concerned? Yeah, that developed, yeah, economically the nations that they colonized.
Well, if you look at former colonial countries, especially in North Africa, like Florence, Nigeria, and stuff like that, the infrastructure that was not made for the black man. I will say that the infrastructure was not made for the black man. It was made for us. But they sure as hell took it, and they sure as hell learned from it. And that, I think, all in all, is a good thing.
All right.
So I think the actual stuff,
just that point,
and the stuff we taught, the farming, the Chinese railroads, which the Africans burned. They burned. They didn't even want to learn from it. So I mean, this.
What are you talking about?
When the Chinese went over in the same kind of colonial expedition that the British did, and they created railways not for the purposes of the benefit of the country they were in,
exactly,
for their own purposes.
Exactly.
When they left, what did the Africans do with the railroads?
Yes.
They burned it.
In what nations are you talking about?
In North Africa. North Africa. Yeah, no, but the Chinese went over as well. In North Africa. The Chinese went over as well.
The Europeans tended to use Chinese labour to build railroads. So they did it in America, they did it in parts of Africa, yeah. They did it in parts of the Caribbean as well, yeah. In the 1800s, they did that. Right. Now, let's explore the fallacy that you're speaking about. Right. The reason why people might burn railways. Necessarily. But you're saying when they left, yeah, I disagree with that. The fact of the matter is, as you've already admitted, these people built railways to facilitate their colonial enterprise. So the railways that were often built in colonial empires were built directly from resources like mines, directly to coastal areas. Yes? And to move troops around, to move goods around. None of this was benefiting the people.
If I was African, I would look at that and go, oh my God,
none of this.
What is this amazing creation that these people...
You know what? There's no amazing creation because there's nothing that African benefits, yeah? To benefit the Africans. Listen, there's nothing that benefits the African from having resources transported from their natural resources, yeah, to the coast. That only benefits. No, but even afterwards, because if you are colonized by a people, your number one priority in fighting for freedom is not going to be to continue to trade the colonizer. The railway only benefits you. The railway from your natural resources to the coast only benefits you if you have an interest in exporting your resources.
You look at the railroad and
That's
go,
from
we
what?
can use this for
Yeah. So, Kwame Nkrumah, for example, built railways to link up not African resources with the African coast, but to link up Africa with Africa.
Come on, big up Africa, man.
What?
When was this?
The 1950s to 1960s. Yeah, that's what happened. And how many years did the same thing?
African still roads in the 1950s.
Oh yeah. In fact, I'll tell you better than that. I'll tell you better than that. What was happening before that? Yeah, was after 1807 when the British apparently abolished the slave trade, they started to invade Africa for the sake of colonialism. So instead of being able to build roads, Africans are busy fighting white people. That's what happened. But it's difficult to build roads. It's a little bit difficult to build roads. It's a little bit difficult to build roads. Yeah? When you've got invaders coming to your land and taking resources. So, you know, like when you can't put resources to build the roads, why? Because you put your resources towards fighting wars on your own land. For example, Britain, it was difficult for Britain to build roads during World War II. That's why they know. That's why they brought my ancestors over here. Yeah, my grandparents over here after World War II to help you build the roads and your hospitals and your schools. But it was difficult to build, right? Because it was difficult to build during World War II. Yeah, right? Because the war was on the homeland. Yeah. So if the British come to Africa, yeah, when did they come to in the 1800s, around 1800s. What was it doing? Many different things. All right, well, let's deal with this. Sorry, where's contact? I want to give him the mic. All right, let's deal with this. What preceded, if Britain abolished slave trade, in 1807, what were they doing before that?
If Britain was
abolished the slave trade in 1807, what were they doing before that?
I would guess, and this is a guess because I'm not 100%, actively participating in the slave trade?
Definitely. Yeah. So then now your question should be, what was happening before the so-called slave trade?
Well, slavery always happened.
No. I'm talking about that. That should be your question. But you're asking me what Africa did before. So I'll take you through the process now. So before colonisation, we're dealing with the process of enslavement, yes?
Yes.
Right. So before the process of enslavement, what was going on in Africa? That's the question now, yes? Yes? Before the process of enslavement, the question now is, what was happening in Africa, yes?
Yes.
Have you heard of the Mali Empire?
Mali?
Yes.
Is that Somalia?
No. Mali Empire. No. Have you heard of the Songhai Empire? No. Have you heard of the Ghana Empire?
Wait, the Ghana Empire, isn't that what took over the rest of the world and done like lots of good stuff and build infrastructure and stuff like that?
Took over the rest of the world? No. The Ghana Empire didn't take over the rest of the world.
Wait, didn't the African empires, didn't they go to the rest of the world creating infrastructure and stuff like that?
Have you heard of the Bakonga Empire?
No, are these tribes?
No, these are empires. These are empires. Yeah, these are empires.
Are these empires?
So these are nations. These are nations that encompass many so-called what you might call tribes.
Would you say the reason I don't know about that is because of the racist British education system that doesn't teach us about the...
It might be a contributory factor, but the fact that British are proud, that presumes your superiority over the rest of the world. So learning about the existence of empires in other places might not be high on your agenda.
It's not even that. They haven't done anything.
But I've just given you about 5-6 different examples of empires that existed on the continent of Africa.
But you have to give me
now you have to ask me. Now you have to ask. No. But I don't have to give you one.
Like the Ottoman Empire, the Mongolian Empire, the Roman Empire.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. Those things, are important to British history. So what it is that in order to justify,
how is the Ottoman Empire important to British history?
In order to justify enslaving African people, many Britons, had to develop a forced historical narrative for the African.
Which was?
That the African was a savage when the British came.
Well, like they were in tribes throwing spears and stuff like that?
Well, first of all, being in tribes throwing spears is not in and of itself.
How do you think that look to colonialists though? That come over on big ships that they've built and they look at people throwing spears. They would say savages.
Why?
No?
Why?
Isn't that fair enough?
Why would it be savage?
Well, look, I'm not going to defend.
It's a cultural interpretation within that context. Like you came to that country, right? You saw people dressed the way they were. So why do you where did the concept of savage come from? Like, and why would you think of someone as a savage?
Yeah.
Well, again,
and what was the weapon of choice in Europe during that time? Let's say it was 1400s. What was the weapon of choice in Europe?
Good old backhand. No, I don't know. What is it? What was it?
So you're saying that a backhand is less savage than a spear?
No, I'm joking. I don't know. Tell me.
Right. Wait, this is the point I make. You're making a lot of statements based upon
no
knowledge or information.
It's like so these advanced Europeans. Or
who told you that Europeans were advanced when they came?
Not you, definitely not you. But they come to Africa, in their massive ships, in their already civilized countries, and they see people throwing spears, and they go, these people are savages.
But is that what they saw?
Hang on. I'm not even on their side and going, yeah, no, they are savage. I'm going, I can understand why they would say that.
Yeah, like based upon a Eurocentric understanding of history and human development, you would say that.
Sure.
But we haven't even ascertained whether what they saw when they came there was people throwing spears.
No, because the truth is actually, there were schools, there were hospitals. And the black man and the black woman had skyscrapers and they were doing lots of... There was nothing. There was nothing there. Am I lying? Was there any buildings that were built?
Yeah, there was buildings that were built.
Okay.
There were buildings that were built. That's why I asked you if you've heard of empires like Mali, empires like Ghana, empires like Songhai. Have you ever heard of the Nok civilization?
The what, sorry?
Nok civilization. Nok civilization.
NOK, no.
Yes. And the Nok civilization, people like the Nok civilization are historically proven, to have invented the craft of metallurgy. You know what metallurgy is? Metallurgy is the manipulation of metals.
Okay.
Yes? Right, to a certain degree. So my point is that if you study Nok civilization, you will see early metallurgy in West Africa. I haven't even touched on East Africa yet, and the now, and these kinds of things. And even early European historians, when they went to East Africa, the Nile, will tell you, about the flourishing civilizations that they met and found there. So no, Europeans did not find people throwing spears when they got to Africa.
They didn't.
This was a colonial narrative that was drummed up by European anthropologists in order to justify slavery.
But the Kenyan flag has two spears in it, man. It's obviously a part of some sort of
of course. The spear is a weapon, just like the sword, just like the dagger, just like the javelin. The spear is a weapon. So we're not ashamed of the spear.
No.
The spear is at a particular point in history.
Worshipping a Middle Eastern god.
Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Yes. I've got the Bible in my bag.
I did it complete university.
I love how you're keeping yourself so calm, yet coming with such logical, rational arguments. So presenting your points so well.
Well, you know the thing is, honestly, my argument is never.
What's the name?
I'm just simply saying, slavery is a use. Yeah. We're in slavery right now. We're in slavery right now. North Africa.
Not everywhere.
Wage slave.
I will say this to you though, you see these spears that you're talking about?
We're still in slavery, brother.
No, I agree with that. The spears that you're talking about though, that were so savage, when the British were looking to colonize, are you aware of the fact that the Zulu people and their so-called spears scared the British so much, that they weren't even afraid to confront Shaka's army.
Isn't that a film with fucking?
No. Shaka's an individual in history.
No.
There was a film done in his life, yes, but he's actually an actual people.
No, bro,
and the Zulu are actual people. There is a film named Zulu as well, which is a colonial narrative.
It was like 4 British soldiers against 20,000 Zulu.
You're talking about Rourke's Drift.
I can't remember.
Rourke's Drift.
Who's the actor? The guy from
Michael Caine.
There's a film called Zulu, right? Again, that's British propaganda.
No, that film is historical fact.
It's historical fact, obviously, because it's written by a British man.
But you know the funny thing is, you missed that before that battle took place, earlier in the day, you had the Battle of Sangawana, where the Zulus defeated the British.
You would hope so, man, because I swear they lost the battle where it was 2,000 and them on 5.5 guys. Sure.
But that's, again, British propaganda.
That didn't happen.
For a long time, the British were afraid to fight the Zulu. Afraid to fight the Zulu.
They know their own country. They know their own
Afraid
lands.
to fight the Zulu.
Sure.
Afraid.
I'll be very
and
surprised.
so the point that I'm making is that whatever spears that you see, in Africa, were formidable enough, to defeat the British for a long time.
I'm not going to ban
For a long time. All right, so don't disrespect the spear, you know.
Absolutely
Don't
not.
disrespect the spear.
Is it true that the Zulus? Is it true that the Zulus were to some extent a competing African empire, and they were seen as by the British as a threat? They actually did. They weren't indigenous to what is now South Africa, but they had come down from further in the northwest.
Yeah, so there's varying different narratives about how the Zulu Empire or people kind of expanded. What is true though is the fact that a lot of it was inspired by the need to withstand and protect groups of people from increased European invasion into that area. So in a sense, the expansion, the development of the Zulu people is contested because in order to develop the people to a certain degree, other nations had to be subdued and brought in line, if that makes sense. So it wasn't always pretty. You know what I'm saying? So you're right in the sense of the fact that
right? They were seen as like a regional threat. To British
Partly
power.
because what Shaka was doing was basically you either fall in line with the program or we're going to invade you. And all that was about basically, look, these Europeans are coming, and they're going to take over this whole thing. So Shaka was a threat in the sense of the fact that you're either going to be Zulu or you're going to be conquered. That's what I'm saying.
And they weren't from what is now South Africa, right? Is that right? They weren't indigenous. They had come from somewhere in the northwest.
That's more than 4,000 years.
But that's the point. So I'm saying that.
I thought they were like recent.
You're talking about Bantu expansion.
No, but he's talking about the Zulu though, because the Zulu was more recent. But my point is that
Bantu had come down from the further in the northwest.
They were from between Nigeria and modern day Cameroon.
They moved down into the south.
But that was like more than 4,000 years ago.
That's our next thing, right?
The same as the Zulu.
The
Zulu were Bantu.
You're
consider so.
You're talking about the Khoisan who were there
originally. Right. So, but the difference is, but there are people other than the Khoisan who have been there for because you talk about if it's over 5,000 years ago, they've been there for a long time. It would be true to say that there were groups in what is now today South Africa that may not have always been Zulu and became Zulu at one point. You know what I'm saying? Because the empire building in an African sense is normally about encompassing different so-called tribes into one unit.
This is common all over the world.
This is what I'm saying. So you know, why I say that is to make it distinct from British Empire, so to speak, which is a slightly different thing. When you travel across the world,
that was the other. That was my.
I'd agree with you. The British were more advanced in raping, robbing, pillaging than anybody else in human history.
Why do you always shout at the British? What about the Spaniards and the Portuguese?
No, I agree. No, but I'm only dealing with the British because he brought me a British issue. That's
I mean, they're going to
I have no love for Europe in general in that sense.
So what about the Spanish and the Portuguese? What about the Spanish and the Portuguese who initiated the slave trade?
Yeah, we're not going to have a disagreement about that. You know what I'm saying? I would still say that the British excelled in it far beyond anybody else, right? But
if I was to ask you one thing, and I'm not taking his side, but I want your opinion.
That's fine, bro. You don't want to take his side, though. You know? Be very careful.
What is your opinion of the West African squadron that controlled West Africa and prevented the Spanish and the Portuguese from continuing with the slave trade? They would stop their ships and then they would free the Africans. And then when the British colonized Lagos colony, that became a sanctuary where Africans would run away from their slave masters and come to that colony to be free, which was being ruled by the British.
Was you aware? All right.
No, Nigeria.
Okay. So this taps into his question. 1807, Britain abolished the so-called slave trade, 30-some years before that, what happened was they lost one of their number one colonies, which was what became the United States of America, 1776. At that point, because France was an ally of America, France becomes the number one superpower in the sense of the fact that they now have an inordinate control over the so-called slave trade. So whereas Britain was transporting enslaved Africans to America before, now America was getting its enslaved Africans from France. Yes? America itself made very, very few voyages across the Atlantic to get enslaved Africans. They got them from Britain, they got them from France. Yeah? So, the West African Squadron was effectively Britain's war machinery, not to slave Africans, but against France, because Britain is at war with France at this time. Yeah? That's the first thing. Second thing is, yeah, they did that. They intercepted French ships, but many of those Africans, many of those Africans, yeah, were not being sent back to Africa. They were being transported across the Atlantic to be enslaved in British colonized Caribbean.
By the West African Squadron. The West African Squadron was taking the Africans they freed to be sold as slaves in the Americas. Oh, that's interesting.
Right, so you find Africans arriving in the 1800s on British ships, the abolition and so-called slave trade from places like Congo, yeah, and West Africa. So there's a massive influx into Jamaica, for example, of Africans from Congo during the 1800s.
But wasn't Congo under Belgium?
No, this was before.
This is before the Belgians.
Before the Belgians colonized, but during the enslavement period, it was primarily the Portuguese that were fastened with that Central Africa.
And weren't these other powers, Portuguese, Spaniards, and Belgians, weren't they far more brutal than the British? I'm not justifying what the British may have done in Africa, but weren't they generally much more in Latin America as well as in the Congo?
No.
The Belgians.
No, I don't draw. To be honest with you,
the so-called genocide.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I tend not to draw.
Specifying techniques.
Like a hierarchy of brutality between, right?
Yeah.
When I say that the British excelled at it, though, is because
they were the first industrial power. They had the.
And I'm saying that they were the ones who built the longest-lasting superpower off of this endeavor. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think necessarily that the British. And so what it really means is that they were able to rob more than anybody else. Right? That's what I'm saying. Right? I'm not one that says that I'm no friend of Spanish enslavement or Portuguese enslavement or Belgium. The Belgians were vicious, yeah.
In Congo,
vicious, entirely just murderous individuals.
This was unprecedented.
But we've jumped though. You explained the West African Squadron and you gave your opinion, which was very interesting.
Yes.
But what of the fact that Lagos then became a colony, and within that colony, slavery was abolished? So Africans who were enslaved would run away from other parts of Africa to come to Lagos to be free.
Isn't that a good thing?
What is your opinion on that?
Isn't that a good thing?
So,
well, I'm not saying what you say. I'm just.
I know. No. Again, before you came, I was explaining that right after Britain apparently abolished the slave trade, they started to develop colonial aspirations on the continent. Lagos was one of the first ports that the British developed in order to get hold of African resources. Lagos is on the coast, right? So that you find all of these places on the coast, where the British set up shop. And they put forward this propaganda because as well as the fact that there was a lot of dynamics on the continent as well. So for example, before the European slave trade, you had the Arabic slave trade and kind of things there. And because of that, European anthropologists, who were part of the colonial project, were studying African nations, and because of that, so we had the Arabic slave trade, the European slave trade. The social order of many African nations has fundamentally changed to facilitate this reality. So now you have African so-called social order that is involved in this process for over generations. So, in order to curry favor with the indigenous social order, European anthropologists started to curry favor with the so-called chiefs and talking about abolishing slave trade. That was part of the propaganda, that the British abolished African slave trade. That's what I'm saying. That was part of the propaganda. That's what they said. But at the same time, they're coming with ships and with army and to subdue people, and you see what I'm saying. So it's all propaganda for the sake of facilitating colonization. That's what it is.
But if the Royal Navy caught African slave ships in between Africa that were transporting slaves, they would hang them on the spot.
Say that again.
when Britain was spending its own empire's money going up and down the west coast of Africa, supposedly after we had already said we were
Sorry, let me stick up in there. You said when Britain was spending its own empire's money.
That's right.
Yeah. When did Britain
Jamaica's money.
Exactly.
Caribbean's
So
money. The Caribbean's
so
money.
the empire,
Yeah.
the empire's money
Right.
was nothing but ill-gotten gains, stolen wealth.
Our friends and family.
You know what I'm saying?
Our friends and family.
You get me? But spending its own empire's money.
Extended relatives.
I don't-
But
nonsense is
if we actually did, when we did capture slave ships
Yes.
that was Africans transporting Africans with slaves.
There are no slave ships of Africans transporting Africans. There are no slave ships
Bro,
of Africans
I
transporting Africans.
100% read that on the back of a cigarette packet. That's
sell
true.
their rivals from other tribes into slavery.
So there are that you have.
Ship might be a wrong word that I was using. It might not be a
No,
ship.
there are- I said-
a vessel that can balance on water.
There are-
Slavery was in a sense used by African rulers to get the better of their rivals. Didn't they use slavery in that way?
This is a very complex issue. Yeah.
Because it's true.
For
It's not black and white. Basically, it's
No.
Pardon the pun.
pardon the pun. It's not a black and white issue. And also, you also refer to other nations or empires who have used slavery. And what about that? The fact that that's just a part of history. It's brutal, but civilizations and nations from all ethnic backgrounds, all periods, have engaged in some form of slavery.
the first thing that needs to be said is that when Europeans first came, yeah, they came with purpose-built ships, yeah, to transport people, yeah. That's what I'm saying. So the decision to enslave was not made between Africans and Europeans. Europeans came with that intention. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what the initial response of Africans was actually to fight back. Yeah, you'll find Africans fighting back all throughout this period. So we're not talking about, and I'm talking about throughout the 300-400 years of enslavement, you will always find Africans fighting back. The reason why I'm saying that is because people talk about African chiefs selling people. They don't talk about the fight back. They don't talk about groups coming together to withstand this
They
thing.
give the impression that somehow Africans themselves
We're just
some
complicit.
African were
Right.
complicit
Now,
in the slave trade.
The practice of getting rid of, for example, there were no prisons, for example, in Africa during at this period, yeah. So you had captives.
I'm fucking with you.
So you had captives, yeah, prisoners of war, and these kinds of things. And over time, yes, one of the just like how Britain got rid of its captives in prisons and them kind of things there by sending them to Australia and New Zealand and these kinds of things,
Where they
right?
would create just amazing countries. It's madness, man.
Yeah, and wipe out indigenous populations in the process.
What we do,
Hell the fantastic era that Europeans.
Hell the Queen.
You know what I'm saying? All that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. After they just wipe out the indigenous and then build a country on their bones and celebrate it. It's fantastic. But anyway,
And now the remaining
Yo,
people
give us the context. I don't want to go home with this mic. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. What's it called? Yeah. So my only point is that Africans, the dominant dynamic of Africans was to protect and defend against enslavers, not to sell. And oftentimes, what was happening is that chiefs, that resisted were killed off. Nations were subdued, and Europeans installed chiefs, and imposed them, and funded them, gave them guns, and ammunition to do their bidding. So when we say African kings and chiefs and them kind of things there, we have to look at the whole picture.
So these were pretty much like collaborators, you might say.
Basically.
But there was something. There was the Sokoto Caliphate,
which was again, and I'm gonna upset my brother right now.
Doesn't this
Which was
European expansion?
no, it doesn't.
Sokoto Caliphate.
It was contemporary. It was a contemporary dynamic. But what he's talking about, Sokoto Caliphate was
Mali Caliphate.
Yeah, no, it was more. It was more
It's in Nigeria.
Nigeria today.
Okay,
All right. But Usman Dan Fodio was it, right? Yeah.
He declared himself caliph, didn't he?
Right.
And they were fighting against my ancestors, the Yorubas, and the ones they defeated, they would take and they would sell it.
Right. So there was that dynamic as well, because they were trying to subdue. Because they were trying. They basically said that everybody should be Muslim.
It was much earlier, so it was like it went into the early 19th century.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So my point is that the dynamic is complex. Yeah. Now, just like you say, there's slavery all about the place.
But this was more obviously, European slavery in Africa was more systematic. It was more
Definitely. And this is what I'm trying to make. So you even have situations in which like Britain will go into like places like Sudan, and they would find a one people group with different subgroups among them, and they would facilitate a process by they want to separate each of them into a separate and distinct tribe in and of themselves. So the people them now are not able to protect themselves as a group. They've got to protect themselves as these little enclaves of people. And then for this work group, you install a chief. For this group, you install a chief. For this group, you install a chief.
It's very, very systematic and thought out.
So when we say chiefs, these are not a lot of these people that we're calling are not indigenous chiefs of the people. They're installed, by the enslaver. And we had some sellouts. Everybody got sellouts.
But in between collaborators and
we got some sellouts. Now, but if, for example, your nation's fighting back, and these people come back with a machine gun and mow down everybody, I can understand how somebody might say, you know what, I'm not going up against that. What do you need? I get that. I understand the sensibility. I really do. But nobody talks about that dynamic in relation to anybody else. Like you said, slavery's been going on for however long. It's only in the African context that people emphasize collaboration and people that sold their own people. There are in any dynamic of slavery, there are people among the enslaved group that collaborated with the people that were enslaving them.
Well, we've had it in our own.
Right, but I'm saying it's only in the African context that people emphasize that. They don't emphasize it with the Jews. There were Jews that collaborated with Hitler.
Yes.
Oh, right.
That's not emphasized.
They funded the banks. They funded the
But they don't emphasize it. I'm saying when we talk about the Holocaust, we respect the fact that there was a dynamic going on that was Germans, Nazis against Jews. And everybody understands that's it. We don't try to inflate the numbers of collaborators among the Jews, and we don't do that.
Undermine
if you listen to David
the significance
of
slavery.
Right. And inflate the role of collaborators, deflate the role of freedom fighters, and make it a collaborative effort. No. That's not, we're not having that.
I think it depends on the subject you're talking about, though.
Why?
Because the Holocaust, that is the taboo subject that no one can speak about. That is, even if you have a different persuasion of how the events took place in World War II, like the murdering of 25,000 Polish soldiers that they said was the Nazis, but actually found out it was the Soviet Union, stuff like that. There's countries you can't speak about that. Like actually law, like you can't even talk about that. David Irvin's an historian, a revisionist who goes over World War II. And, he has a different...
Wait a minute, is he the one who denies the use of concentration camps? Or he questions...
No, he denies that 6 million Jews were gassed in Auschwitz.
And he says there were no gas chambers.
He said the gas chambers that were used were to like... I'm not saying I'm a cheerleader for
that. But I hear you. I think that revisionist history, though, coming from a proud British gentleman, to be concerned about revisionist history is a bit of a hypocrisy.
No.
Because nobody revises history more than the British.
Because the thing about it is, man,
For example, I'll give you an example. If we're going to talk about World War II history and them kind of things there, nobody's history or legacy has been revised more than that of Winston Churchill.
But bro,
mass murderer.
I'm
mass murderer.
I'm probably on your side of the argument, because when it comes to the bombing of Dresden and stuff like that, and what the British actually done to the German people, I don't think the British know enough about that.
What about what the British did to the Indians?
About the starvation of 400,000 Indians. Yeah, bro.
More than 4 million.
Bro, you're not going to have me cheerleading, you know what I mean? You're never going to have me go, like, but look at this.
So my only point to you is that if we're talking about revisionist history, I think the British got a lot to deal with in terms of their own history before they get to Germany and the Jews.
You know what, bro? I think the media and the way it portrays British history anyway, I think that's already doing so much to make Britons hate themselves. They're teaching us about what we've done to Indians.
Hell no.
That's going to add on, that's just what it's going to add on top.
It was only a few years ago that Britain held a poll on who's the greatest Briton in history.
Well, you're going to do that in your own country,
and Winston Churchill won. That's not making them feel ashamed to be British.
He was Prime Minister at the time when we won the war. The war is celebrated as this
whilst he was mass murdering and trying to hold on to empire. that was mass murdering and so on and so forth.
I prefer Winston Churchill's early days. I prefer him in the earlier part.
When he was in Sudan murdering people.
No, when he criticised Islam, when he had even though he called it...
At that same point, he was in Africa murdering people as a part of the army.
Yeah, there was a war going on. He was a soldier.
And feeling and celebrating Britain's empire-building effort around the world.
I'd give up, but here, as a proud Briton, you're going to have me say, "Oh, I wish we still had an empire. I wish that we were still exploring and developing and making some bigger stuff." Because I think, in terms,
is that what you think the empire was about? Exploring and developing,
and kissing and making schools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How do you benefit from the British Empire? Because when the British Empire was created,
can I be honest?
you had a class system within Britain.
For me, it's
a good point.
For me, it's a
And you would
religious.
have been
and Britain was enslaving their own people. Did you know that?
For me, it's a religious.
Britain was enslaving their own people.
Yeah, for me, it's a religious thing. The spread of Christianity, I think, has done possibly one of the best things for the world. You understand? So I think when Britain goes out, and there's other people that went out and done it peacefully. Can't remember the names off the top of my head, but they've done it peacefully. British Empire went out and done it in force. But I think the spread of Christianity and moral belief and moral Christian belief, I think is the best thing. Personally, that's me personally. So
the same people that spread the Christian religion and moral belief were enslaving Africans, raping men, women and children, yeah, you know what I'm saying, robbing resources. Priests blessed the ships that went to capture human beings.
they don't want it to sink, man.
Oh, indeed.
They don't want it to sink.
Indeed, to bless the ship, yeah. Indeed. So, as long as the ship don't sink, you can transport, kidnap the people, kill them, rape, murder, pillage, but as long as the ship don't sink.
But bro, this is a time period where people's moral compass was, we know this is right. And conservatism in Britain at that time was a different conservatism it is today.
The moral compass of the people that were being negatively impacted by this thing knew very well that this was wrong.
I read a poll a couple of years ago, tell me if I'm wrong, and you will know, yeah. 60% of Jamaicans still wish they were under British rule. Paul. Mic drop.
Mic drop?
Mic drop.
That's not a mic drop.
60% of Jamaicans still wish they were under British rule.
You know, I have heard of this poll. I don't say I know it to be true.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I have heard of this poll. I have heard of this poll.
You want to come in closer, sir?
Sorry, yeah.
But that's not surprising. If it were true, it's not completely surprising.
Why's that?
Because colonization was essentially the process of teaching a people that the nation that was colonizing them was superior to them in civilization and them kind of things there. Yeah? Also, because of the fact that Britain had a vested interest in maintaining a certain living standard in Jamaica whilst it was colonizing, yeah, there were certain things that took place because they actually had like a sizable British English population that they had to cater for. There were resources that Britain was giving to its colonial protectorates, that were not being given, when they were kicked out or they left, as a result. The relationship now between places like Jamaica and Britain is economic, in the sense of the fact that the economies are still controlled by the so-called Commonwealth, which is again run from this country, the UK, and institutions like the World Trade Organization, the IMF and the World Bank, who control world economy, who set the price, of banana, for example. Jamaica was known for exporting banana, but it got to a point whereby Jamaica now was not able to control the prices of its own bananas because places like America and Britain were controlling the prices.
You won't hear
so
me
mass impoverishment took place. So it presents the illusion.
But bro, wasn't that that's the decisions of the top few? That's not even the decisions of
the top few. Who, sorry?
So when you're looking at the sorry, man,
go ahead.
When you're talking about decisions that are made at the top, and there are boards and committees in which these decisions can be made in terms of the WTO and IMF and stuff like that. The thing about it is, for me, it's not Britain as a whole, which I think is what's given the negative rap in terms of racism, and people should look at and stuff like that. So when we're actually looking at the decisions that were made in terms of pricing and stuff like that, we're not, it's a very select few, man. It's a select few people that...
Are you part of the British elite?
What do you mean by elite? Define elite.
The government, the decision-making aspect of Britain. But you came here celebrating British Empire, the British exploits in slavery,
adventurism and what we've done.
All that kind of stuff, and the fact that we never had anything in Africa before the British came, and so on and so forth.
That's true. Yeah.
So the point is that it doesn't take for the British decision-making bodies to reinforce this narrative and to sanction the behaviour of their elite decision-making bodies.
I wonder, what year was the IMF and the WTO?
After World War II. So we're talking about between 1945 and 1950.
You notice in your country, they don't teach you one particular important history. It happened in the 14th century, 1387.
Okay.
The Peasants' Revolt. When people in your country in the southeast...
When the white man was enslaving the white man in Britain.
And
we enslaved ourselves, man.
And they rebelled against the king who was a 14-year-old boy called King Richard II.
Great man, great leader. No.
And they had a document which they wanted him to co-sign and accept. And in that document was the abolishment of serfdom. Serfdom would no longer exist. But unfortunately, they failed. But they never teach that in schools. They never teach that in schools for the English. What's serfdom? Do you want to know what serfdom is?
God, please.
Serfdom goes all the way back. Sorry, I'm taking.
No. It's a conversation.
I love learning.
Goes all the way back to the time 1066 when the Normans invaded.
Okay.
They brought in their own caste system. Basically, what it meant was they owned the land and they shared the land amongst the various barons. So if you were a Saxon person, the land you lived on belonged to the Norman Duke.
Okay.
The animals on there belonged to the Norman Duke.
Yes.
When you decided to sell that stuff in a market, you had to get that Norman Duke's permission. And he took the proceeds. If you wanted to get married, you needed to get his permission.
Yes.
And you didn't have the right to leave that land without his permission. So you couldn't just say, I'm going to...
You're talking about the 1400s, yeah? Now, at this point in West Africa, there were two-story buildings, yeah? You know what I'm saying?
Where?
Houses had lavatories.
Where?
Yes.
Bro,
People were wearing silk and leather in West Africa during this time. Yes. People were transporting, trading in gold. Yes, and salt, and diamonds and these kinds of things in West Africa during this period of time. The living standard of the average ordinary person in West Africa during that time was higher than the average person in Britain.
Where are you getting that information?
Read history.
No, on a genuine level.
There's a fantastic book called When We Rule by a man called Robin Walker. Break it all down.
So what do you think we were doing? We were climbing up trees, eating monkey nuts or something.
But even if we were, the joke is, even if all we were doing was climbing trees, and eating fruit, the living standard of the average African was still higher than the living standard of the average Briton during that time. Even if all we were doing was wearing loincloth and grass skirts and eating fruit and chucking spears, the living standard of the average African in West Africa during that time was still higher than that of Britain.
Yeah, but you could say that about the Celts before the Romans came over.
It's a very good point. Romans are brutal invaders.
That's it, man.
You know what I'm saying? It's a very good point. Very good point.
Well, why do you still co-sign the British Empire?
Oh, gotta love your own, innit, man? And that's the thing. That's the whole reason I first came over here as well. Because my whole.
I agree. We agree on that. I love my own. You love your own.
That's
we agree on that.
You know what? And slightly, I want to end on
the
that
difference
point,
is though. The difference is me loving my own doesn't equal me coming to rob, rape, pillage, and genocide you.
It don't.
You know what I'm saying?
In my experience, what I've realised is white people are such melts, man. They're such pussies when it comes to recognising their own people. And again, you don't even have to come on an empire tip where it's like me, where I'm like, oh, we've done all this. It's like cultural, musical, all this history you have between yourselves. We are quite willing in this country. And not so much in America, I feel, but definitely in this country. We're so willing to let that go away with the demographic change that's going on. No problemo. That's why I came over to my guy, because I felt like we might have a common ground.
I don't know if you're willing to let it go.
What do you mean?
I think that Britain knows how to adjust itself to hold on to power.
You think? Bro, what, the census in 2001...
I'll give you an example of what I mean. During the anti-colonial period, in the 1950s and 60s, Britain was basically, the empire was breaking up. Yeah. So Britain knew it had to recalibrate. And that's when Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister at the time, delivered that speech about the winds of time are blowing through the dark country. And he basically said to the British people then, listen, we really need to readjust our method of engaging with these people because they're fighting for their liberation. They didn't want a repeat of what the Mau Mau did in Kenya and when they started to just, what's it called, and the kind of things there. So they had to readjust the program, So in a sense, what they did was repackage colonialism, you know what I'm saying, and grant independence instead of allowing Africans to just fight for it, because they granted independence in such a way that they fostered these relationships, yes, killed off a lot of and got rid of a lot of revolutionary leaders, and fostered these relationships that will allow them to continue to hold on to resources and pose as friends. So now what's happening, you see today, is talk of globalization, whereby the West, so it's no longer Britain anymore, it's the West, the Western values and democracy. And they go around the world shipping democracy to people, which is basically another means of transporting and developing and shipping out Western culture, which includes British culture, you know what I'm saying, to the rest of the world. And they do it in the name of humanitarianism. You know, we're going to go save these people from the despotic leaders, or, you know what I'm saying, that kind of things there. So no, for the ordinary Britain, it might seem like you're losing your culture. But really, the elites know what they're doing, and you're going to benefit in the long run.
Who are the elites, though? Who are the elites?
Well, you know who your elites are. The crown and the lords, white, and they're not white. No?
Their last name's usually Goldstein, and they don't count themselves as white.
I'm not going to get into that with you.
That's right.
I'm not gonna, but even if their name's still Goldstein, they're still white.
No, they're not. Hey, no, they're not.
They're still white.
They're
still white.
Hey, brother, it's been a pleasure, though, man. I love John.
Take it. Have some fun certain times, you know what I mean?
I was going to ask you, did you ever find out more about Trocos?
I didn't. Thanks for reminding me. I didn't. Yeah, I didn't. I'm going to look into it.
It's still going on.
Yeah.
But I was
stressed him out, ask him. He smashed him up, bro.
You know?
I tell him, go have a beer. Go to the interview. I like that. You study. We need people like you, bro.
I'll give thanks, brother.
Carry on, brother, educating us.
I'll try.
You know what I mean? Brother, you know history, bro.
I'll try, you know. Oh, how you doing? Long time no see.
Yeah, good to see you.
You've been MIA.
I just wanted to give you an invitation.
Okay.
So.
Come take over everything from your
Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
You know about this Extinction Rebellion. So they're going to be doing a new action starting from October the 7th.
Okay.
For 2 weeks.
Okay.
And they're planning to be bigger than the April action.
Okay.
So they're going to be taking 12 sites